Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker, Fox News contributor, friend, mentor. Difficult moments, Newt Gingrich, difficult moments. Now, I know you want the price of gasoline to come down for the midterms, but just step back for a minute. You heard General Keane, you may have heard my riff. What are you thinking about this story? You know, it moves rapidly. Now it includes the Abraham Accords and so forth, as General mentioned. What do you make of it, Newt? What are you thinking?
Well, I think you have a religiously inspired dictatorship which took 1 million casualties in an 8-year war with Iraq in 1980 to 1988, and which killed 45,000 approximately of its own people this year. I think our Western analysts do not have a clue what we're up against. Look at this so-called period here where we've had, in a sense, a truce. No truce in the Strait of Hormuz, no truce on the price of oil, no truce on anything that matters to us. The only truce is we're not bombing the Iranians who can work with the Russians through the Caspian Sea, rebuild their military capability. Every day that goes by, they're rebuilding their capability. Huge difference in intelligence viewpoints. Apparently, and I'm not privy to this in terms of secrets, but apparently the Saudis, who have pretty good intelligence in the region, and others, believe that the Iranians have the capacity to do 10 or 15 years worth of damage to their oil fields. And so they're saying, you know, don't take the risk. If in fact, as we've been told over and over again, we have dramatically stripped the Iranian military, I don't understand why it's a huge threat to Saudi Arabia. So I am not very sanguine right now. I think every day that goes by, the Iranians are happier. The American people are madder. I mean, the effect of all this on the election this fall, if at Labor Day we are at something like $4.50 or $5 a gallon, Republicans are just going to get annihilated. And you're going to have 2 years of Chuck Schumer and Jeffries doing everything they can to screw up America. This is a serious problem, and I felt and have argued that the center of gravity actually is the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, and that we ought to put every element of military power we have into that and winning that fight. And frankly, we ought to be very tough with the Saudis and others. Well, I would strongly say to the Saudis, fine, you don't want us to use your facilities. When the strait's open, your ships aren't going to go through it.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
here's the problem, I think. The president, to a degree, everybody who thinks he's an isolationist, he's a coalition leader. He's put together a huge coalition, much bigger than any other American president in the region. But the question is, as Douglas MacArthur once said, you know, councils of war are councils of timidity. You can't allow the weakest of your coalition members to define for you what you're going to do. And you have to say, we're now a coalition, glad we're all on the same side. We are doing this. And if you're not doing this, you're not part of this coalition. So you make a decision.
But would you agree that if his diplomacy is stalled out, and the Iranians obviously are famous at that, and he's got to use additional military combat actions, you know, for the goal, whatever. I'm not going to get involved. I'm no expert on the military planning. I'll leave that up to CENTCOM. They do very, very, very well on their own without me. I'm just saying this. That option must not be taken off the table. It may well be to achieve the goals and the red lines for. We will have to go back and use the military option. I'm just trying to keep that on the table. Because, Newt, I think American voters want to see a president You know, he has shown so much courage and fortitude, no question about it, so much courage and fortitude to do what others wouldn't do over the past 50 years or so. But I'm just saying, Americans want to see a strong leader, right? It's not just about gasoline prices at the pump, for heaven's sakes.
Look, I think they could put together a Save Our Cities campaign and have a rally in every major American city with Trump and say, look, it's clear the people who chant death to America, the people who've been trying to get nuclear weapons and missiles, they want to take out Chicago. We think it's worth doing whatever is necessary for Chicago to live.
Yes.
Now you decide, are you with the weaklings who are willing to risk Chicago, or are you with the people who want to protect Chicago? If he was prepared to wage that kind of campaign, he'd both win the election this fall, but then you got to follow through on it. Yeah, I mean, basically, the Iranian dictatorship is the equivalent of Nazi Germany. It is a religiously motivated, deeply held, at least 160,000 members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. 160,000. A decapitation campaign doesn't work against that size. And so I think you've got to decide. I believe personally, if they took on the Gulf first and the Strait first, won that fight, the world would then relax, oil would flow, prices would come down, and people would, you could take 3-4 years, support, as we did in Afghanistan in the 1980s against the Soviets, support the Iranian people, get them arms and training and weapons and coordination, and over a 3 or 4 year period, destroy the regime. You don't have to put a single American soldier on the ground, but you have, time today is not on our side. Time today is on the side of the Iranian dictatorship.
I don't know.
Because of what it's doing to the price of oil.
I don't know. I think this president has done what no predecessor would do. And if the Iranians want to underestimate him, if the Democrats want to underestimate him, so be it. He'll never give in. He'll never give in. If it takes longer, it takes longer. Newt. You know him. I know. I mean, he won't give in. He will not give in, nor should he. He'll never let history slip through his hands. This is a historical moment. And he has the upper hand. He has the leverage. I don't care what the newspapers write, the media and all that. He has the leverage. And he's got to make sure everybody knows that, which I believe it will. I got to get out. We're always running out of time. I need to talk to you for 30 minutes. I'm sorry. Newt Gingrich.
Good to be with you.
God bless you. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Great to see you again. All right.